Fran Brown was named a top 10 recruiter in the nation. But you know what? Maybe he should be higher than just top 10.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jackson Holzer, and this is Locked On Syracuse. And thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen of every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are always free and available wherever you get your podcasts, whether you're watching on YouTube, listening on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And on today's show, Fran Brown was named a top 10 recruiter in the nation. We are going to discuss why he deserves to be in the top 10. Plus, later on, we'll discuss whether or not he should be higher than just top 10 in the country. And later on in the podcast, what's next for Syracuse football? What's their short-term outlook and what is their long-term outlook? All that and more here on today's show. And before we get to everything, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Host of the Portal podcast and Locked On recruiting expert Brian Smith released his top 12 head coaches in the nation, specifically in recruiting. This was not the top 12 best game day head coaches. This was the top 12 best recruiters that are currently head coaches in college football. So let's get right to the list and where Fran Brown fell on the list. And I will be showing this right now on YouTube. But if you are listening on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, don't worry. I will read you the list right now. Number 1, Kirby Smart, Georgia. Number 2, Mario Cristobal, Miami. Number 3, Ryan Day, Ohio State. Number 4, Dan Lanning of Oregon. Number 5, James Franklin, of Penn State. Number 6, Marcus Freeman of Notre Dame. Number 7, Hugh Freeze of Auburn. Number 8, Dabo Sweeney of Clemson. Number 9, Fran Brown of Syracuse football. That's right, he did crack the top 10. Number 10, Lane Kiffin of Ole Miss. Number 11, Mike Elko of Texas A&M. And number 12, Brent Venables of Oklahoma. So that is Brian Smith's top 12 head coaches in recruiting around the country. The first question that I have for you all, and I think I know what you are going to say because I think 99% of you all who pay attention to this channel are Syracuse fans. And the off chance that we get other teams' fans in here is usually when there's a game. And while we're in early June right now, there are no games being played. So I'm going to guess that most of you watching or listening to this are Syracuse fans. But the question I have for you all is, does Fran Brown deserve to be on this list? Does he deserve to be top 12 in the nation among head coaches in recruiting? And does he deserve to be top 10 in recruiting? For those that have been following along this podcast for the past year plus since I have been the host of Locked On Syracuse, you may know this, that I try to be fair with Syracuse. I understand that this is a Syracuse show, and I am also a graduate of Syracuse, class of 2024. So yes, I am pretty young. And I try to take my orange-colored glasses off, even though, yes, there is obviously bias. Does Fran Brown deserve to be on this list? I'm going to take the glasses off, even though I don't wear glasses. And I will tell you right here, right now, Fran Brown 100% deserves to be on this list. What, did you really think that I was going to say he doesn't deserve to be on the list? I mean, are you kidding me? Of course he deserves to be on this list. This is not even really a question, but why does Fran Brown deserve this ranking of number 9 in the country among head coaches in recruiting by football recruiting expert Brian Smith. Why does he deserve it? Well, he has elevated Syracuse football recruiting significantly. Again, forget the wins and losses, because for this list, wins and losses do not matter. He had Mario Cristobal as the number 2 head coach recruiter in the country. I'll tell you here right now, Mario Cristobal is not the second best head coach in college football. So again, this is solely about recruiting, not about wins and losses. Let's use 24/7 Sports rankings to go over where Syracuse was in recruiting the 5 years before Fran Brown and since Fran Brown has taken over. So pre-Fran Brown, and I want you all to keep in mind that the ACC at this point only had 14 teams as opposed to the 17 that they now have in college football. In 2019, Syracuse was 47th overall in the country in recruiting, 8th in the ACC. It's not bad. Not bad at all. 2020, they were 57th in the nation in recruiting, 10th in the ACC, so it starts to dip a little bit. 2021, 60th overall in the country, second worst in the ACC. They're getting worse. 2022, 68th overall in recruiting, third worst in the ACC. Yeah, they just keep getting lower and lower. And then eventually we hit rock bottom with Syracuse football recruiting. In 2023, they were 88th in the nation. 88th. How? Were they so low in 2023? That was by far and away last in the ACC. But overall, when you average it all out, the 5 years before Fran Brown, Syracuse was 64th overall in the country in recruiting and 11th in the ACC. Keep in mind, there were only 14 teams in the conference again. Now with Fran Brown, he has completed 2 recruiting classes, 2024 and 2025. 2026 is pending, and 2027, there are 3 commits, but it's way too early to really discuss 2027 recruiting. But here's where Syracuse stacks up since Fran Brown has taken over. 2024, 37th overall in the country, 8th in the ACC. That's upper half in the conference because there's 17 teams. That's already higher than where Syracuse ever was in the 5 years before him. 2025, they do dip a little bit, but it's still pretty good and better than what Syracuse football was before Fran Brown, and it's not even particularly close. They were 42nd overall in the country and 10th in the ACC. 2026, which in my opinion, I think is going to be the strongest Syracuse football recruiting class to date with Fran Brown. Currently 18th overall, 5th in the ACC. I don't necessarily think they'll be top 20 overall in the country or 5th in the conference, but the reason why I do believe that it'll definitely be higher than 2024, where they were 37th in the country and 8th in the ACC, is because Syracuse currently has 4 players in its recruiting class. 4 that are rated 4 stars or better, right? On at least 2 major recruiting services. And keep in mind that Syracuse is among the finalists for 2 elite wide receivers currently in 2026. 4-star Messiah Hampton from New York and 5-star from Miami, Calvin Russell. So with that being said, thank you, Brian Smith, for having Fran Brown in the top 10 head coaches in recruiting around the nation. Certainly deserved to be on that list. And I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below, because we're going to talk about this in the next segment. Should Fran Brown be higher than 9th on the list, right? This is just the first step of recognition. It's good, but should he be higher than 9th? That's coming up next on Locked On Syracuse. The NBA Finals are just about ready to begin with the Indiana Pacers and the Oklahoma City Thunder, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments, whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player. There's never been a better time to get in on the action, and FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. New to FanDuel? Well, now is the perfect time to sign up because guess what? You can head to FanDuel.com right now and place your first $5 bet. That's it, just a $5 bet. And if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. This is Locked On Syracuse. I'm Jackson Holzer, and we're just about ready to continue with this podcast talking about Fran Brown being named a top 10 recruiter in the nation by football recruiting expert Brian Smith, also the host of Locked On's newest channel, The Portal Podcast. And make sure you check that out when you are done watching or listening to this podcast, because I'm sure Brian is going to break down his list more in depth, each and every coach on it. And certainly he will cover Syracuse football recruiting when it warrants it, because they're definitely in line to get some pretty big players in the 2026 recruiting class. But before we continue discussing whether or not Fran Brown should be higher than 9th on Brian Smith's list, I just want to shout out each and every one of you for watching and listening to Locked On Syracuse. We are closing in on 4,000 subscribers on YouTube. If you have not done so already, please hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. It helps the channel grow and reach all Syracuse Orange fans. And of course, shout out to those who subscribe to Locked On Syracuse each and every day. You all are truly the best. Let's get back to the list. And Fran Brown, should he be higher than 9th? Comment your thoughts right now in the comment section below where you would rank Fran Brown among all the head coaches in college football in the country, specifically in recruiting, not X's and O's, not game day stuff, not wins and losses, because again, Mario Cristobal is not the second best head coach in college football, but he's a pretty damn good recruiter over there at Miami, right? Now, I'm not going to sit here and say Brian Smith is being disrespectful to Syracuse and disrespectful to Fran Brown by putting him as the 9th best recruiter in the country among head coaches. That is a tremendous honor. And Brian also knows more recruiting than I will probably ever know in my entire life. I just want to throw that out there. But I will say this. Having said those, Fran Brown should be top 5. Fran Brown is definitely a top 5 head coach recruiter in the nation. Number 1, Syracuse is the outlier school on this list. I'm going to pull up the list again on YouTube and forget the names for just a moment here. Just listen to the schools, okay? Pretend that these names don't exist. Georgia, Miami, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, Notre Dame, Auburn, Clemson, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Oklahoma. Those are all, for the most part, historic national football powers. Now, they all have varying degrees of success. Sometimes those schools like Ohio State, they're good every single year. Same thing with Georgia. They're just really good every year, basically, no matter what. Some schools like Auburn, for example, they'll have some down years. They'll have some really good years and spike years where they can get to a national championship and win a national championship, but they'll also have years where they crater and they miss a bowl. But regardless, to see those schools on a top 12 list is not that surprising. Those are big football programs with big NIL budgets, certainly bigger than Syracuse. And then the one outlier school on that list, again, forget the names, is Syracuse, which some people have actually brought this up to me before. It's not really Syracuse fans. It's fans actually of SEC schools. My friends are fans of SEC schools, and they'll mention how Syracuse is a private school in New York. So they have a huge athletic budget and they spend a ton of money. They spend more than everyone else. They have a huge NIL budget. That is simply not true. Syracuse football does not spend as much on its athletic programs compared to those other schools on the list. And I don't even think it's necessarily close between some of those schools. So essentially what I'm saying is that Fran Brown is doing more with less. And if Fran Brown keeps it up, if he keeps doing what he's doing with Syracuse, and then it starts really more translating on the field, it did last year. It did, right? They went 10-3. But if he keeps doing these things, one or two things is going to happen. Either Syracuse will invest more in Fran Brown, aka they'll give him a raise and more term on his contract, and they'll invest more in the program in general to the point where maybe they one day do get into national title conversation. And instead of being, in the 30s, low 40s and recruiting around the nation, they're top 10. They're top 5. They're number 1 or 2 in the ACC, right? Or Fran Brown leaves, which I know we don't really want to think about, and I don't think that's going to happen necessarily in the near future, but it's just something to keep in mind if, Syracuse really keeps winning these games. More context here with Fran Brown. Before Fran Brown arrived at Syracuse, he was the defensive backs coach at Georgia, and 24/7 Sports, so it wasn't Brian Smith, it was 24/7 Sports, named Fran Brown the number 1 recruiter in the nation. Now, obviously, at Georgia, it's a little bit easier to recruit. You got a lot more money. You are in the SEC. The SEC sends more players to the NFL than every other conference. And it's Georgia. It's a historic national program that's competing for national championships year in and year out. It's essentially, if they don't win the national championship, the season was a failure, right? Now, keeping that in mind, how it's easier to recruit at a school like Georgia, and obviously Fran Brown was named number 1. How many of these coaches could do what Fran Brown is doing with the same restrictions that he has? I don't want to be dismissive of the other coaches on this list. They are great coaches. They are, for the most part, great recruiters. And hey, just because you have all the ingredients to be a great recruiter doesn't mean that you're going to be a great recruiter. We've seen it before, actually, with Florida, even before Billy Napier. Dan Mullen at Florida, not a very good recruiter. They were not happy with him. So just because you have all the ingredients doesn't mean you're going to be a great recruiter. But hey, how many of these coaches on this list can do what Fran Brown is actually doing? Is that a fair question? I think it is. Comment your thoughts in the comments section below. In fact, I think the one that's kind of closest to it is Dabo Swinney and what he did with Clemson. It's not like Clemson has this super rich, historic football program where they're Ohio State and they always win. He kind of built that program up to what they are now. Maybe Fran Brown could be the next Dabo Swinney, right? But I think if all else were equal, you give all these coaches the same restraints, same NIL, there are not 8 better head coaches in recruiting than Fran Brown around the nation. I'm sorry, there just isn't. There is no way that some of these coaches on this list, I don't know exactly who, but there's no way that some of them would have Syracuse in the race for a 4-star like Messiah Hampton, even though he's a New York guy, or a 5-star like Calvin Russell. There's just no way. And I kind of think of Marvin Harrison Jr. here. Just want to bring up this real quick. Maybe some of you are familiar with Marvin Harrison Jr. as far as his story with Syracuse football. When he was coming out of high school in the 2021 recruiting class, Syracuse was not even remotely close to landing Marvin Harrison Jr. Keep in mind that his father, Marvin Harrison Sr., played for Syracuse and was a first-round pick and became a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Keep that in mind. It would be, and Marvin Harrison Jr. did not even consider Syracuse. It would be like if Kyan Anthony did not consider Syracuse basketball. Forget not committing. If he didn't even consider it. If Syracuse basketball offered Kyan Anthony and he's just like, no, I'm not going there. That's just not happening. I won't even visit. That's kind of what happened with Marvin Harrison Jr. And one of the reasons is because he cited that Syracuse doesn't really develop receivers into the National Football League. Certainly, I mean, nobody can compete with Ohio State in that regard. But the reason why I bring up Marvin Harrison Jr. back in 2021 is this. I bet you if Fran Brown was the head coach at that time, Marvin Harrison Jr. would have strongly considered Syracuse football. Dare I say he might have even committed to Syracuse football. That is the difference between Fran Brown and what Syracuse has had in the past. And that's also why I question, could these other head coaches on this list do what Fran Brown is doing? So overall, I don't really know exactly who I would bump out in the top 9, 10. But Fran Brown's a top 5 recruiter in the nation among head coaches. You can make an argument that he should be top 3 or even number 1. But I'll just settle on conservatively top 5 right now. And you're going to have to find 4 names that you need to bump below him. It's just how it is. Comment your thoughts in the comment section below. Where do you think Fran Brown ranks among head coaches in college football, specifically in recruiting? I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Coming up, what's next for Syracuse football? The short-term outlook and the long-term outlook for this team. We'll discuss that next on Locked On Syracuse. What's the next step for Syracuse football? Their short-term outlook and their long-term outlook. And I guess you can feel free to chime in right now. I mean, how do you feel short-term about this team? How do you feel about this upcoming season in 2025? How do you feel about maybe 2026 and 2027? When do you think Syracuse football is going to get into the national title conversation? I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section below here. The next step is simply put this, and I know I'm going to be like Captain Obvious here, so please bear with me, but trust me, I got a lot to say, all right? The next step is to simply keep winning. On the field specifically, but also off the field with recruiting. Simply keep winning. 2024 was a really good year for Syracuse football. They had excellent recruiting class. They won a bunch of games. It was awesome. I think we all loved that year. And beating Miami at the end of the regular season, then winning the Holiday Bowl was a perfect way to end it, right? What's funny, and I think what sometimes I certainly catch myself with this, it's kind of hard to believe that Fran Brown is only entering his second year with Syracuse. Isn't that kind of weird to think about? Because of how much he's done, you would think he might have been here for 4 or 5 years already. This is only his second full year coming up. And not only is it his second full year at Syracuse, it's his second full year as a head coach in college football. He was not a head coach before Syracuse. I kind of have to stop myself and take a step back and realize that it's kind of crazy to think about. Obviously, the long-term goal is to win a national championship, but really it's to put yourself in position to win a national championship. There's no guarantee that any program is going to ever win, but your job is essentially to put your team in position to win and letting it all play out. And hopefully it plays out in your favor and you win a national championship, right? That's the long-term goal. And Syracuse at this point is not at that stage. That's okay to admit. They are not in the national title conversation yet. Doesn't mean they can't be going forward. But as of right now, Syracuse is not a national championship caliber team for this upcoming season. Are they even a playoff team for 2025? Well, most likely not. Just being honest, they're most likely not going to be in the college football playoff. Although, I mean, they have a really tough schedule, which works against them, but it also works for them because if they do well with the tough schedule, 9-3 was not good enough last year in the regular season to make the college football playoff. Wasn't even close for Syracuse. They were in the 20s when all was said and done at the end of the regular season. But 9-3 this season with that schedule, they pull off some upset wins, which if they go 9-3, that is going to happen inevitably. They're going to win some games that you don't expect, like at Tennessee or at Clemson or at Notre Dame. I mean, at SMU, you're going to win one of those games if you go 9-3 in the regular season. So it might be enough if they go 9-3 to make the college football playoff. It might. I don't think they're going to go 9-3, but just keep that in mind. What Syracuse simply needs to do this upcoming season is hold their own. There's no shame. And I know that the Syracuse coaching staff isn't going to think this way. And I know that players aren't going to think this way. And I know that probably you aren't going to think this way. But hold their own. It's a really brutal schedule. You got an inexperienced quarterback. Make a bowl. If you go 6-6 or 7-5, that's okay. That is reasonable. And you know what? They could definitely be the 2025 version of Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech last year was a really good team. Remember the end of the regular season when they took Georgia to 8 overtimes in Athens? They did that. And remember how they also beat Miami at home? Remember? Georgia Tech did that stuff. But they only went 7-5 in the regular season, and it's because, well, Haynes King missed part of the year as their quarterback, and also they just had such a brutal schedule. It was tough. I mean, they had to go to Syracuse, and Syracuse was a really good team. That might have been their 4th toughest game on the schedule. It was a tough year for them. They had a really good team, just did not get good schedule luck. But for Syracuse, if you're a good team, you show promise, you got a young core group of players this upcoming year, you keep building with recruiting and in the transfer portal, you're slowly but surely going to increase the national presence and prestige of this program. And also keep sending guys to the NFL. That significantly helps your recruiting if you can show recruits, hey, you go to our school, you can make it to the National Football League, which is probably most of these high schoolers' goal, to make the National Football League, whether they have a chance or not. That's just most likely how they think. So when you think year by year, or at least when I think about it, and feel free to let me know if I'm being stupid or I'm an idiot. I mean, comment your thoughts in the comment section below right now. 2026 is the year that I'm circling. That's it. I think that is the possibility of when Syracuse makes the college football playoff. I did think in 2024 there was an outside shot, and they nearly pulled off an Indiana-type year where they went 11-1. But, you know, some things broke their way and some things didn't break Syracuse's way. So they ended up 9-3. But they were almost Indiana. However, going into that year, I did not think they were going to make the college football playoff with a first-year head coach. This upcoming year, it's just such a tough schedule. So how are they going to win 9-10 games, which is what's going to be required to make the college football playoff? I don't know. But 2026, I think that's the year. Because by that point, the playoff is all but guaranteed to be 14 or 16 teams. So there should theoretically be more spots available, although with automatic bids and stuff, that could get kind of complicated. Plus, the non-conference schedule eases up. I mean, you got New Hampshire at home, you're at UConn, Toledo at home, and yes, they're playing Notre Dame, but Notre Dame is a home game in 2026. And Clemson, speaking of in-conference, Clemson is also a home game in 2026. So hopefully 2026 could be the year that Syracuse makes the college football playoff. And then beyond that, once you make the college football playoff, you're going to have so much more momentum with the program. You keep building from there. And maybe by 2027, you put yourself in national title conversation. Maybe. That's the year-by-year outlook for Syracuse football, in my opinion, the goals going forward. Obviously, if you listen to Fran Brown and the coaching staff and the players, they're not going to say this. They're going to say, our goal is to go undefeated and win the national championship, which that has to be their mindset. But I'm just a podcast host, so I can tell you all, hey, this is what I think realistically what they could do. Make a bowl again this upcoming season. 2026, you load up. And then 2027, if all breaks right in 2026, maybe 2027, you're competing for a national championship. But hey, comment your thoughts in the comments section below. When do you think Syracuse could get into the national title conversation? I want to hear you in the comments section below. Now, as far as what is coming up on Locked On Syracuse here in the future, tomorrow, we will have on 24/7 Sports Syracuse insider Mike McAllister on the podcast, we will talk about Syracuse football and maybe some Syracuse basketball recruiting. It'll be a late night release. I think he's scheduled to come on at 9 p.m. Eastern. So that will probably premiere at 10:30, 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern. So, hey, late night podcast for you all. And if you can't stay up that late, that's okay. You can just wake up in the morning and it'll be right there for you all to watch and listen to. On Friday, we got Poll Friday. Who's Syracuse football's most likely breakout? So that's what's coming up in the near future here on Locked On Syracuse. And thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen today. Now, for your second listen, speaking of Brian Smith, football recruiting expert, he is the host of the new Portal Show here on the Locked On Podcast Network. He's got the latest rumors and signings each and every day. You can be the most informed fan on the rapid changes to the college football landscape. Find the Portal Podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Folks, thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. If you really enjoy the podcast, be sure to hit subscribe and tell all your friends about Locked On Syracuse so this channel can grow and reach all Syracuse Orange fans. And I will see you all again soon.